Before Europe feared his name, before kings whispered about him like a coming storm, Napoleon Bonaparte was just a skinny kid from a rough island nobody respected. He was born in 1769 on Corsica, a mountainous land filled with rebellion, clan loyalty, and endless resentment toward foreign rulers. The island had only recently been taken by France, and many Corsicans saw the French as invaders. Napoleon grew up hearing stories about resistance fighters and warriors who refused to kneel. That atmosphere shaped him long before he ever touched a battlefield. But here is the twist worthy of an anime protagonist origin story. Napoleon was technically French, yet he never truly felt accepted by France. When he was sent to military school on the mainland as a child, everything about him made him an outsider. His accent sounded strange. His family was not rich. His classmates mocked him relentlessly. The future emperor of Europe spent years isolated, angry, and humiliated. While noble boys laughed at parties and showed off expensive clothes, Napoleon locked himself away reading history books for hours. Caesar, Hannibal, Alexander the Great, men who bent the world through willpower alone. Those names became more than heroes to him. They became a challenge. Imagine the visual scene like in FXRUSH anime opening. Snow falling outside a cold military academy. Students mocking a silent boy sitting alone by candlelight while stacks of war books surround him. Then the camera slowly zooms toward his eyes as narration says, he had no friends, no wealth, and no status. So he decided to conquer destiny itself. Napoleon developed a terrifying trait during those years. He became obsessed with efficiency. While others relied on privilege, he trained his mind like a weapon. He studied artillery mathematics, battlefield formations, logistics, politics, philosophy, and even human psychology. He realized something that many commanders never understood. Wars are not won only by strength. They are won by speed, morale, and momentum. In modern anime terms, Napoleon was not the strongest fighter in the room yet. He was the strategist silently calculating 10 moves ahead while everyone underestimated him. Then history opened the first door. France exploded into chaos during the French Revolution. The monarchy collapsed. Nobles were executed. Streets ran red with paranoia and political violence. Europe watched in horror as France tore itself apart from the inside. But for ambitious young officers, this disaster created opportunity. Old aristocratic commanders lost power, and suddenly talented commoners could rise through merit instead of bloodline. Napoleon saw the chaos not as tragedy, but as a ladder. At only 24 years old, he gained national attention during the Siege of Toulon in 1793. Royalist forces had handed the port city over to the British, threatening the revolution itself. Many French commanders failed to break the defense. Then this young artillery officer proposed an aggressive plan that others considered too risky. Napoleon understood terrain better than his superiors. He positioned cannons with brutal precision and targeted the key locations controlling the harbor. Once those positions fell, the British fleet was forced to retreat. The victory changed everything. Overnight, Napoleon transformed from an obscure officer into the rising star of revolutionary France. Politicians began noticing him. Soldiers admired him because, unlike aristocrats, he fought alongside them. He spoke fast, thought faster, and radiated unnatural confidence. There was something cinematic about him, almost unreal. Even before becoming emperor, he already carried himself like a man chosen by history. But France was still collapsing internally. Riots erupted constantly. Political factions murdered each other. The government became weak and unstable. In 1795, royalist rebels marched through Paris hoping to overthrow the revolution entirely. The leaders of France panicked. They needed someone ruthless enough to stop the uprising immediately. That someone was Napoleon. His solution was horrifyingly simple. Cannons. When thousands of rebels flooded the streets, Napoleon ordered artillery loaded with grape shot directly into the crowds. The explosions tore through the attackers with devastating force. The rebellion collapsed almost instantly. Paris was saved, but the streets became a nightmare of smoke, blood, and shattered bodies. In a single day, Napoleon proved something terrifying to both allies and enemies. He would do absolutely anything to win. That moment became the true beginning of his legend. To the people of France, he was the defender of the revolution. To his enemies, he was a monster born from chaos itself. But to Napoleon personally, this was only the first checkpoint. He did not want to simply survive history. He wanted to dominate it. By the time Napoleon took command of the French army of Italy in 1796, France expected very little from him. The army was starving, exhausted, unpaid, and barely functional. Many soldiers marched without proper boots. Supplies were scarce. Morale was almost dead. Senior politicians in Paris saw the Italian campaign as a side mission, a distraction far away from the real war zones. Napoleon looked at that broken army and saw future conquerors. The first thing he attacked was not the enemy. It was hopelessness. He rode directly into the camps and delivered speeches with the energy of an anime commander about to awaken his true power. He promised glory, victory, riches, and immortality through battle. Soldiers, he declared, you are hungry and poorly clothed. The government owes you much and gives you nothing. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. The troops erupted with excitement. For the first time in years, someone spoke to them like they mattered. Then Napoleon did something that shocked Europe. He moved faster than anyone thought possible. Traditional European generals fought cautiously. Armies crawled across the map slowly, trapped by rigid formations and outdated thinking. Napoleon shattered that system entirely. He divided his forces, marched rapidly between enemy armies, struck isolated targets with overwhelming force, then disappeared before opponents could react. His campaigns felt less like normal warfare and more like watching a speedrunner break the game mechanics of Europe itself. The Austrian and Piedmontese armies expected France to attack in predictable ways. Instead, Napoleon struck like a storm. One victory became three. Three became 10. Town after town fell under French control. Every battle increased his reputation until soldiers began believing he was literally unbeatable. And honestly, on the battlefield, he almost looked supernatural. At the Battle of Lodi, Napoleon led troops across a heavily defended bridge while enemy cannons obliterated everything in sight. Soldiers died around him in horrifying numbers, but he kept advancing through smoke and chaos with complete fearlessness. The image became legendary, a young general charging toward artillery fire while the future of Europe followed behind him. That was when the myth truly evolved. His soldiers stopped seeing him as merely a commander. They started seeing him as destiny itself. In FXRUSH anime style, this is the point where the soundtrack changes completely. The underdog outsider from Corsica is gone. Now the screen shows rapid battlefield cuts, banners burning, cavalry charges crashing into enemy lines, and Napoleon standing motionless on a hill while entire kingdoms collapse beneath him. But Napoleon's greatest weapon was never the cannon. It was understanding human psychology. He knew exactly how to manipulate emotion. Before battles, he inspired troops with promises of honor and glory. After victories, he rewarded loyalty aggressively. He made ordinary soldiers feel like heroes inside a grand historical epic. At the same time, he flooded Europe with propaganda, portraying himself as the unstoppable savior of France. Newspapers praised his genius constantly. Paintings exaggerated his victories until he appeared almost godlike. He was not just fighting wars. He was controlling the narrative. That combination made him terrifying. Most generals only defeated armies. Napoleon defeated morale itself. Entire nations began panicking before battles even started because his reputation arrived first. In 1797, Austria finally surrendered after repeated defeats. France gained massive territory, and Napoleon returned home as a national hero. Crowds celebrated him everywhere he went. Politicians who once underestimated him now feared his popularity. He had become more than a general. He was evolving into a political force powerful enough to reshape the nation itself. And yet, Victory only fed his ambition further. Napoleon did not dream small. Conquering Italy was merely proof of concept. He wanted Europe. Soon, he launched an expedition into Egypt, hoping to strike Britain indirectly by threatening trade routes to India. The campaign became one of the strangest arcs in his life. On one side, his forces achieved stunning victories on land. At the Battle of the Pyramids, Napoleon crushed Mamluk cavalry using disciplined infantry formations and devastating artillery tactics. The scene looked absurdly cinematic. French troops fighting beneath the shadows of ancient pyramids, while Napoleon shouted, "40 centuries look down upon you." But then reality struck back. The British Navy under Admiral Nelson destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile, trapping Napoleon's army in Egypt. Suddenly, the invincible conqueror faced disaster. Supplies dwindled, disease spread, resistance intensified. For the first time in years, Napoleon's momentum began cracking. And here is what makes him such a fascinating historical character. When a situation turned hopeless, he abandoned the campaign entirely. He left his army behind in Egypt and secretly sailed back to France. To some, it was betrayal. To Napoleon, it was strategy. Because while France thought he had vanished into the desert, the government back home was collapsing once again. Corruption, instability, and political paralysis consumed the nation. People were desperate for strong leadership, and Napoleon knew exactly when to enter the scene. Like the protagonist returning before the final act, he arrived in France not as a mere general anymore, but as a man preparing to seize an empire. When Napoleon returned to France in 1799, the country was exhausted. The revolution that once promised freedom and equality had descended into corruption, paranoia, and endless instability. Governments rose and collapsed constantly. Politicians argued while the economy suffered. Citizens no longer cared about ideology. They wanted order. They wanted strength. Most importantly, they wanted someone capable of controlling the chaos. Napoleon understood that perfectly. Instead of marching into Paris like a conqueror, he entered like a savior. Using political alliances, manipulation, and military pressure, Napoleon orchestrated the coup of 18 Brumaire, overthrowing the weak French government almost without bloodshed. Officially, it was presented as a patriotic act to save the Republic. In reality, it was the moment Napoleon began transforming France into his personal empire. And the terrifying part? Many people welcomed it. He became first consul of France, effectively the ruler of the nation, but he did not immediately crown himself king. That would have been too obvious, too reckless. Instead, Napoleon rebuilt France piece by piece while making the public fall in love with him. Roads were repaired, education systems improved, government administration became more efficient, the economy stabilized. He even created the Napoleonic Code, a revolutionary legal system that promoted equality before the law and destroyed many old feudal privileges. For millions of ordinary people, Napoleon looked like proof that the revolution had finally succeeded. But beneath the reforms, something darker was evolving. Power addicted him. Every victory convinced him more deeply that he was chosen by history itself. He trusted his own judgment above everyone else. Ministers, advisors, generals, all eventually became secondary to Napoleon's will. His confidence became so overwhelming that it crossed the line into destiny-driven obsession. Then came the moment that shocked Europe. In 1804, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of the French, not a king by ancient bloodline, an emperor created through pure ambition. During the ceremony inside Notre Dame Cathedral, even the Pope was present to bless the coronation. But when the crown was handed over, Napoleon took it himself and placed it onto his own head. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. He was declaring to the world that no church, king, or tradition had given him power. He alone had claimed it. That scene feels almost too cinematic to be real. Imagine the FXRUSH anime adaptation. Massive cathedral halls illuminated by golden light, nobles kneeling in silence, orchestral music swelling while Napoleon slowly raises the crown with his own hands. Then complete silence as narration says, the revolution destroyed kings. Napoleon replaced them. Europe panicked immediately. The monarchies of Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia realized France was no longer just a revolutionary threat. It had become a military empire led by a man who seemed incapable of defeat. Coalition after coalition formed to destroy him. But every time Europe gathered armies against France, Napoleon responded with devastating precision. Then came Austerlitz. The Battle of Austerlitz in 1805 is often considered Napoleon's greatest masterpiece. Outnumbered by Russian and Austrian forces, he deliberately appeared weak, baiting the enemy into attacking what looked like vulnerable positions. The opposing commanders believed victory was certain. It was a trap. As enemy troops advanced, Napoleon launched a perfectly timed counterattack straight through the center of their lines. The coalition army collapsed into chaos. Entire divisions were surrounded and destroyed. Soldiers drowned while retreating across frozen lakes under artillery fire. By the end of the battle, one of Europe's strongest alliances had been annihilated in a single day. After Austerlitz, Napoleon no longer seemed human. He redrew the map of Europe almost at will. Kingdoms disappeared. New states were created. His family members became kings across the continent. French influence spread everywhere. At his peak, Napoleon controlled or dominated most of mainland Europe. It felt as though history itself had started orbiting around him. And yet, beneath the victories, the cracks had already begun forming. Because the larger his empire grew, the more impossible it became to control. Britain still resisted him relentlessly from the sea. Guerrilla warfare erupted in Spain, draining French resources in brutal urban combat and endless ambushes. Nationalism began spreading across occupied territories as people grew tired of French domination. The empire kept expanding, but every conquest created new enemies. Still, Napoleon refused to slow down. That was his greatest strength, and eventually his greatest weakness. He believed momentum solved everything. Attack harder, move faster, push further. Every previous gamble had succeeded, reinforcing the idea that his instincts were infallible. By this stage, Europe was no longer facing merely a brilliant strategist. It was facing a man consumed by his own legend. Then Napoleon made the decision that changed everything forever. He turned his eyes toward Russia. By 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte stood at the absolute peak of his power. His empire stretched across Europe like an unstoppable tide. Kings obeyed him. Nations feared him. Generals studied his tactics like sacred scripture. To millions, he looked invincible, the final boss of European history itself. And that was exactly the problem. Because the more victories Napoleon achieved, the more he believed no force on earth could truly stop him. Russia became the ultimate challenge. Tsar Alexander I had once allied with Napoleon, but the relationship collapsed under political tension and economic conflict. Russia refused to fully cooperate with Napoleon's continental system, a massive blockade designed to cripple Britain economically. Napoleon saw this as betrayal. More importantly, he saw it as defiance. So he prepared the largest military invasion Europe had ever seen. Over 600,000 soldiers from across the empire gathered into the Grande Armée. French troops marched alongside Germans, Italians, Poles, Dutch, and countless others. It was less an army and more a moving continent of steel, horses, artillery, smoke, and ambition. The sheer scale looked unbelievable. Roads disappeared beneath marching boots. Supply lines stretched endlessly across Europe. In FXRUSH anime style, this is the moment where the empire reaches maximum power right before tragedy begins. Giant formations crossing rivers at sunrise. Thousands of banners moving like waves. Napoleon standing silently while officers stare at him with absolute faith. The soundtrack feels victorious, but underneath it, something dark slowly grows louder. Because Russia was not planning to fight normally. As Napoleon advanced deeper into Russian territory, the enemy kept retreating. Towns were abandoned, crops were burned, supplies vanished. The Russians refused to give Napoleon the decisive battle he wanted. Every mile forward drained the Grande Army further. Hunger spread. Horses died. Exhaustion consumed entire divisions before major combat even began. Still, Napoleon pushed onward. He believed one massive victory would end everything. Finally, near Moscow, the two sides collided at the Battle of Borodino, one of the bloodiest battles of the entire Napoleonic Wars. Cannons thundered nonstop. Infantry charges crashed into walls of gunfire. Smoke covered the battlefield so heavily that soldiers sometimes fought without even seeing the enemy clearly. Tens of thousands died in a single day. Napoleon technically won the battle, but it felt wrong. Hollow. The Russian army retreated again instead of surrendering completely. Yet Napoleon marched forward anyway, convinced Moscow itself would force Russia into peace negotiations. Then he entered the city and found silence. Moscow was nearly empty. Even worse, fires erupted everywhere across the city. Buildings burned endlessly while smoke darkened the sky. Whether ordered directly or caused through chaos, the result was catastrophic. Napoleon had captured Russia's ancient capital, but there was almost nothing left to control. No surrender came. No peace offer arrived. Winter did. This is where the entire story transforms from conquest into survival horror. The cold descended with merciless brutality. Temperatures plunged far below freezing. Soldiers starved daily. Horses collapsed into the snow. Weapons froze. Frostbite destroyed hands, feet, faces. Men who survived countless battles died simply from lying down to rest for too long. Entire groups vanished overnight beneath blizzards. And the Russians never stopped attacking. Cossack cavalry struck isolated units constantly, disappearing back into the snow before retaliation could begin. Retreat routes became nightmares filled with frozen corpses and abandoned equipment. Bridges collapsed under panic. Starving soldiers fought each other over scraps of food. The Grande Army, once the most powerful military force in Europe, slowly disintegrated into chaos. One of the most horrifying moments came during the crossing of the Berezina River. As Russian forces closed in from multiple directions, desperate French troops attempted to escape across fragile temporary bridges in freezing conditions. Panic exploded. Wagons overturned. Soldiers fell into icy water and disappeared instantly beneath the current. Civilians screamed. Cannons were abandoned. Thousands died in unimaginable confusion. The retreat from Russia destroyed Napoleon's aura of invincibility forever. When the invasion began, over 500,000 soldiers marched proudly into Russia. Only a fraction returned. Europe immediately sensed weakness. Prussia rebelled. Austria turned against him again. Russia advanced westward with vengeance, burning in every step. New coalitions formed rapidly because for the first time in years, people realized Napoleon could bleed. And once predators smell blood, they do not stop hunting. Yet even after this disaster, Napoleon refused to surrender. That refusal is what makes him both admirable and tragic. Most rulers would have collapsed mentally after losing an army of that scale. Napoleon instead returned to France and immediately started rebuilding another force almost from nothing. Young recruits filled the ranks. Veterans rallied once more under his banner. Somehow, despite everything, he still inspired loyalty. But the empire was dying now, not through one decisive blow, but through exhaustion. Years of nonstop warfare had consumed Europe. Millions were dead. Economies shattered. Nations burned. Napoleon had conquered almost everything around him. Yet in doing so, he created a continent united by hatred toward him. The emperor who once moved like lightning across battlefields was finally being surrounded. And the final act was approaching fast. After the catastrophe in Russia, Europe moved against Napoleon with ruthless determination. The alliances that once feared him now sensed an opportunity to finally destroy the empire that had dominated the continent for over a decade. Armies from Britain, Prussia, Austria, Russia, and several other nations gathered together like hunters surrounding a wounded beast. And still, Napoleon fought back. That is what makes his downfall feel so cinematic. Even when history itself seemed to turn against him, he refused to disappear quietly. In 1813, he launched new campaigns across Germany with the same aggressive brilliance that once made Europe tremble. He continued winning battles despite lacking experienced veterans. Young recruits followed him into impossible situations because his presence alone still inspired belief. Again and again, Napoleon proved he remained one of the greatest military minds alive. But genius could no longer compensate for reality. His enemies had adapted. European commanders studied his tactics carefully over years of war. They stopped fighting him individually and instead coordinated massive coalition armies designed to overwhelm France through sheer numbers and persistence. Napoleon could still win battles, but now every victory cost him soldiers he could no longer replace. Then came Leipzig. The Battle of Leipzig in 1813, often called the Battle of Nations, became one of the largest conflicts in European history before World War I. Hundreds of thousands of troops clashed in days of relentless combat. Explosions shook entire villages. Rivers filled with bodies. Smoke consumed the horizon itself. And this time, Napoleon lost. The defeat shattered French control over Germany and opened the road toward France itself. One by one, Allied armies invaded his empire from every direction. Former allies abandoned him. Kingdoms he created collapsed rapidly. The structure he spent years building began breaking apart faster than anyone imagined possible. By 1814, enemy forces entered Paris. The impossible had happened. Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French, master of Europe, the man who crowned himself above kings, was forced to abdicate. He was exiled to the island of Elba, a tiny Mediterranean prison far removed from the empire he once commanded. Europe celebrated wildly. Leaders believed the nightmare was finally over. Monarchies restored old royal families. Diplomats gathered to redesign the continent without Napoleon. But they underestimated one thing. Legends do not die easily. Less than a year later, Napoleon escaped Elba and returned to France. And this part sounds almost fictional. As he marched inland, troops were sent to arrest him. Soldiers lined up with weapons ready, expecting confrontation. Instead of retreating, Napoleon walked directly toward them alone and opened his coat. "If any man among you will kill his emperor, here I am." No one fired. The soldiers joined him instead. That moment perfectly captures the strange gravitational force Napoleon had over people. Even after disaster, exile, and defeat, men still followed him willingly into danger because they believed history itself moved through him. His return triggered the famous 100 Days. Europe panicked instantly. Coalition armies mobilized again while Napoleon rebuilt power at unbelievable speed. For a brief moment, it looked as though the impossible comeback might actually succeed. The fallen emperor had returned for one final arc. Then came Waterloo. The Battle of Waterloo in 1815 became the final confrontation of Napoleon's life. Facing British forces under the Duke of Wellington alongside incoming Prussian reinforcements, Napoleon attempted to destroy the Allied armies before they could fully unite. Rain soaked the battlefield heavily the night before combat, slowing artillery movement and cavalry charges. Delays disrupted French momentum. Miscommunication spread through the chaos. Some attacks came too late. Others failed entirely. Yet despite everything, the battle remained brutally close for hours. Then the Prussians arrived. Fresh enemy forces crashed into Napoleon's flank while exhausted French troops struggled to hold formation. The battlefield dissolved into panic. Units collapsed. Retreat turned into rout. The imperial dream finally shattered beneath mud, smoke, and cannon fire. Waterloo ended an era. Napoleon surrendered soon afterward and was exiled again, this time to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic, so isolated escape became nearly impossible. There, far away from the battlefields that once shook the world, he spent his final years under constant supervision. And that is the haunting part of his story. A man who once commanded millions ended his life staring at the ocean from isolation. No armies, No empire, no glory, only memory. Yet, even in defeat, Napoleon's shadow never truly disappeared. His legal reforms reshaped modern governments. His military tactics influenced warfare for generations. His rise proved that talent and ambition could challenge ancient aristocracies. At the same time, his wars left Europe covered in devastation and death on a scale few had ever seen before. That contradiction is why Napoleon remains unforgettable. Was he a hero? A tyrant? A revolutionary? A conqueror consumed by ego? The answer is probably all of them at once. Because Napoleon Bonaparte was not simply a man who lived through history. He was a man who tried to overpower history itself.